Hello, my name is Caleb Wharton, and today I'm going to be going over the Sprint 5 for Calcium Overdrive. I'm going to go ahead and launch it here. Alright. After the build's up, I'm going to go ahead and pull up some of the Jira tasks. Here we go. Alright. So the first task that I did this week, or for this sprint, was the intro/tutorial level. The user story for this. As a player, I wanted the level to show the core fundamentals of the game so that I could have a good base knowledge of the game systems before moving on to learning harder mechanics. Some of the mechanics that we wanted introduced in this level were movement, jump, dash, wall run, mantle, light melee, heavy attack, or special attack is what we call it now, ranged attack, multiplier, slide, which slide actually got moved to the second level, checkpoints, pickups for weapons. I think we have one or so weapon pickups around the level. The base sword, what else? The moving platforms, projectile spawners, closing walls, melee enemies, and ranged enemies. So this is kind of the base level showing all of the main core fundamentals of the gameplay here. Going in through the level design, at the start I originally wanted a matinee of the character trying to find their head off the ground because the main character is headless, but we didn't get around to the matinee. We're going to actually try to do something that can be persistent throughout all of the levels of the character coming through a portal. In the start, we wanted to introduce the movement, jumping, just the first two main movement concepts of our game. The first corridor should open from a cell chamber, go into this massive volcanic hellscape. This first corridor leads to the first parkour section. Alright, so let's go ahead and look over the start. And I broke these all up into subtasks of the main task there, or of the main story. Just putting in the introductions that are needed, whether or not they need a introduce area, practice area, or mastery area for there. I spent about 1 hour going through the start here, so we'll start the game. Alright. A little bit big looking currently, just because I have added in a lot of the different placeholders to fill in some of the area in here. Have some chains, using them as leading lines. We wanted to have these little hints along the bottom of the screen here. That falling... Here, I can replay that and show you. Let me restart it. So, to start here, you hit a volume that shows you to move. And then, right about past this pillar here, that other item up there should fall. And that'll bring the player's eyes close down to the ground, let them show, or let them see the, press the space bar to jump. The player has to jump over that gap, and then this leads right into the next parkour area. So, go ahead and pause that and go over this task here for the parkour area. So the parkour 1 area, sorry, scrolling back down through here. Parkour 1, it should have basic parkour and movement mechanics utilized, introduces the mantle, dash, wall run, checkpoints, and moving platforms. So somewhere in there should kind of have an area for the player to utilize that. And then this is just going to be a basic practice area for the movement and the jump. So players should be able to work on some of their movement, because it's a very movement-based game. Same with the jumping. It's very core to the gameplay itself. This should have the easiest parkour obstacles. The whole game, it should be the easiest parkour section of the whole game. No obstacles to kill the player. We wanted this first area to be so easy that the player could fall down, climb back up, try again. It's going to take a recourse on their time, and their time will take a hit for it. But once the player begins to go back through and actually achieve the proper wall run or the proper dash, they will easily be able to go back through the level and get a better time. Then we want to give a small break at the end of before the player engages in combat. And I was going to put some beaten melee and ranged enemies scattered around the path leading into the first fight. I didn't get around to that part just because I didn't have the meshes for it yet. I spent about 2 hours, 54 minutes on the first parkour section here. I'm going to restart the level and take you through it. Alright, going through the first intro. Floor's breaking. Oh! And so here's the first dash. Jump, big gaps, mantle. Alright, little mantle spots. 1, 2, 3 mantles going into this next area, which is the wall run. We have a multi-part tutorial here. Lets the player go through the wall run basics, how to do a wall run jump, so pressing space while wall running, and these are all, you can go previous, next, that way it's accessible for players. I understand we understood it was a lot of information, and we didn't want to flood the players. We are actually still considering breaking these up into multiple tutorials and scattering them throughout this level as well. But so press space to jump before wall running, hold forward strafe into the wall, just the basics of wall running. Press space while wall running to jump off the wall, press shift after wall running to dash across gaps, and then jump from wall to wall to chain wall runs together, and this will help you gain height. Alright, so let's see here. If you fail the first time around, you have this little area right here. Kind of leads you back up. It has a little mantle section. Went through, noticed that a lot of these areas have these orange and yellow sparkles here. This is just to help guide the player. Went through and made that visual effects just kind of a hanging particulate. Super easy for the player to notice the ledges. Scattered some of these different lava assets, or the fire materials that I made, and then some of the chains and other assets throughout here. Added some lighting in, and then we added the second obstacle here, which is just another wall run, but this time without the failsafe. So if the player falls here, they actually understand that there's a kill volume. After you die, you should be taken back to the checkpoint. So see, if I die here, I'm back to the checkpoint. That's the player's first difficult task, and then this is the first leading, or not the first leading one because there's multiple back that way, but another tree kind of pointing the player in the right direction, using these different trees and roots and other environmental assets to kind of guide the player. The first moving platform to be introduced, and this will lead us right into the combat section, which, let me pause here. I'm gonna actually, I'll end up restarting this and running through it into the combat. Let me pull up the board here. Alright, for the combat section 1, simple and easy linear engagement. It's going to be the first combat encounter that the player gets into, so we wanted it to be very, very basic. This is the first initial layout that I had, was with all of the enemies. Of course, through iteration on the level and playtests, we have changed around how it's laid out. So the first combat encounter was originally supposed to be 2 melee enemies, and then 1 ranged enemy, a melee, and then a ranged. The first one was more impactful, just being 1 enemy that you see at the end of this tunnel. You just get this tutorial, you go towards the end of this tunnel, and you are able to fight this just 1 helpless enemy that doesn't have a nav mesh because he's in a nav modifier, so it should keep him in place. be really easy for the player to not kill him, or to kill him. So the first encounter should be less, the second one should be a little bit harder, and then the third should be kind of the culmination of the two enemies. There should only be one path, and this should introduce the ability to light attack, heavy attack, ranged attack, use the multiplier, get pickups like your health pickups and your soul runes, that type of currency stuff, and using the base sword, just the basics of it. Alright, and then I also put that as a subtask down here. Originally slotted for 3 hours, I spent 2 hours, 41 minutes on it. I'll run back through here. Once you've once you've kind of ran through it enough here too, you're able to get through the level pretty quick. The first go around, I noticed that it takes people roughly around 5 to maybe 6 minutes sometimes, but often I can, once you've ran through it maybe once or twice, you can get maybe about sub 3 minutes easily. Okay, going in here, this is the start of Combat 1. It shows you to tap the left mouse button to perform the melee attack. All of the videos aren't updated yet. Those are actually coming in with the next sprint, the next week's sprint. So tapping the left mouse button to perform the light attack, tapping the right mouse button to perform the special attack. That'll be the heavy AoE on this. Same with this update right here. Pressing left alt to perform an ultimate attack. So this is proper. This just needs to be changed to the alt icon. Pressing Q to fire is the proper key for this. So if we go through here, able to kill that one enemy, and then this kind of points us in this direction to go over to these other two melee enemies here, leading us up to another moving platform, and then a melee and a ranged, and that'll be the final bits for Combat 1, which leads us into Parkour. I believe this is Parkour 2. So Parkour 2, let me pause this again. For Parkour 2, I'm going to go into here, and so there's a Parkour 2 section that lets the player practice wall running, dashing, mantling. So originally it was supposed to introduce slides, but we omitted that, so it now introduces projectile spawners, closing wall traps, and the fire traps. I spent about an hour and 15 minutes on this. Let me go in and make sure that I'm not missing anything. So it should have basic parkour. Again, this is the first level, so we want to keep it basic as can be. The basic movements. Easy level difficulty, parkour obstacles. Nothing that's going to be too hard for the player. It's not going to be mandatory to do wall-to-wall wall runs. Some obstacles to kill the player. Nothing egregious though. You don't want something that is so outrageous and there's 50 different obstacles that the player has to dodge in this early stages of the game. Compared to the alternative path, there is no alternative path for this. Maybe in the later patches there will be some shortcuts and some skips, but not yet. Introduce, again, slides omitted. We're going to be introducing projectile spawner, closing walls, and fire traps. We're going to be practicing mantle, dash, wall run, moving platforms, and then mastering the movement and jump, just the basics. So by this point in the game, you should be able to be understanding of how the movement feels and how the jump should perform. Alright, going back into the game here. So we start with a simple wall run. Player can jump wall to wall if they want, or they can even just go a wall run and jump off, or use a wall run, just a regular wall run. Simple one right there. Then this is a little bit more difficult. So this platform is a little bit higher, which means that the player has to jump. So to show this, I kind of put this fire trap a little bit lower and these two higher. So the player kind of understood that if they don't want to go through this fire trap, maybe they should jump before starting the wall run to get a little bit higher. Try dashing through that. So introducing the closing walls, pressing the dash to shift or go through them, practicing the dash there. More fire traps, more projectile spawners, and then this will lead us into combat 2. Right here. We'll pause this. Go into combat 2. After I've went through all these tasks, I'll play through the whole level in one fell swoop as well. So in combat 2, there should be a combat 2 section contains 4 combat encounters, 10 enemies total, 6 melee, 4 ranged. Slotted around originally 2 hours. I spent probably about 31 minutes on this. Let me scroll down in here into this. It's a linear combat section with very basic parkour obstacles. Breaking it up, the first encounter should be 1 ranged enemy blocking the entryway. The second encounter should be 3 melee enemies. The third encounter should be 3 melee enemies and 1 ranged enemy. And then the final encounter should just be 2 ranged enemies. The player should be able to practice their light melee, heavy attack, ranged attack, practice using the multiplier, and the base sword. Alright, going back in here. So here's the 1 enemy at the entryway. Currently, the towers are actually a little bit too tall. So the ranged enemy does work, but he's just not able to see you currently until you get up to his height. So those towers have to be lowered down. Killing these 3 melee enemies on this second encounter here, going into the next encounter. If the player's quick enough, they can keep their modifier or keep the multiplier here. Going into the final encounter in the combat area here, and we get the final couple foes. And to keep the multiplier, since we felt it was enjoyable to have the fast speed, we decided to put some enemies scattered throughout the intro here. There we are. That way the player can keep their multiplier until the end if they're trying to utilize the multiplier properly. Going back into here, we'll go through the next area, the parkour, which is what we actually kind of started it already. So parkour section 3, basic parkour with mid-level parkour skips available, easy to mid difficulty parkour obstacles, some obstacles to kill the player. Practice, you should be able to practice, not the slide, again, omitted from this level, put it into level 2. You should be able to practice the fire traps, projectile spawner, and the closing walls. You should be able to master the mantle, dash, wall run, and moving platforms. And then down in here in the tasks, I logged about 56 minutes into it. Again, this just goes over the basic information of what should be practiced, introduced, etc. Started back there. After that little platform there, going right there into this next wall run. This one is on a higher, here we are, it's a little bit higher, so the player has to either jump, dash, or use a chained wall run here. So definitely a mastery area. That's a long closing hallway for the player to try to practice that. Create a little bit of tension, keeping these enemies scattered throughout. Here we go, leading up to the main combat 3 area, and we're entering it right about here actually. Going into combat 3, sorry, wrong tab there. Combat 3 should be the first basic combat like arena encounter. So it should have kind of a arena feel of it. The player is going to enter this area with just a mass of enemies around. There's going to be multiple encounters. It should be around 20 enemies in total. The first two should be the ranged enemies. We saw them actually on the towers there before we paused this. And then before that, we have those enemies that we scattered throughout. Again, those are the ones that were added after the fact for reasons dealing with the multiplier, to keep the multiplier throughout the Parkour 2 or Parkour 3. So this should have easy parkour obstacles in between and just have a increasing difficulty of enemies as you progress. Up there, those two ranged enemies for the first encounter, and then a horde of melee enemies here. A dash across. There we are. And then going up here to the next floor. If the player has played this level before, they will see the ranged enemies on the tower. That's more so for experienced players. Here we are. Going around here. And then you get to the end point, which takes you to a win volume. We'll quit to the main menu. And then I'm going to read off the last couple sections here. So the end volume should introduce the level rating system, save and load, currency, that type of stuff. I'll show it in the full playthrough of it. The end volume is as well the combat area. The final combat area I spent about 21 minutes on. Here's the other documentation for it. The description just showing the amount of encounters, amount of enemies that it should have roughly scattered throughout it. The end section, again, just should have a win volume, and all routes should funnel the player into that singular location. Spent about 26 minutes on this, just setting up the volume itself and setting up where the final obstacle was going to, or how the final obstacle was going to be set up. Going back in here, the completion criteria for this whole task for this level was pretty much all of the subtasks just broken up. So the completion criteria are all of the subtasks, and I just broke them up into subtasks. Some of the design philosophies I use IPM charts and IPM models. I used leading lines and some breadcrumbs to kind of help guide the player in the early levels. Those will definitely be implemented here more next week, going into getting ready for assets in the final sprints coming up. Valves and gates. Didn't use as many valves as I would say, maybe near the end, as like nearing combat 3, I believe. And Prospect and Refuge, a lot of combat. After the combat, you should have a little bit of a break going into maybe an easier parkour area, or a easier parkour area leading into a more difficult area. Just again, using that IPM, the pacing models, to control the flow of the game there. Alright, I'll go through one quick little playthrough of that level, now that we've actually went through it. Some of the routes there showing up, and some of these rocks, some of the different guides here, as well as implementing the different the hanging particulates. Definitely helps the players differentiate in between which platforms they need to be jumping on. Running around this way leads us into parkour 1. Again, super easy enemies at first. The multiplier, you should get a little bit curious at this point what these noises are and what that little multiplier is doing up on the screen. I believe that we are changing the position of the multiplier in the next sprint upcoming, and changing some of the issues with the sizing as well. Ooh. Alright, jumping up there. If you don't time these right too, you can take a good chunk of damage. The fire traps do a good chunk of damage to the player. Alright, we got that ranged enemy up there. This is kind of the first area that the player is really able to start this multiplier. If you can start the multiplier here and keep it up at a high multiplier around 8 to 10. There we are. We're at about 9 right now. So once we get up to 10, it should last a little bit longer than prior. So we should be able to keep our movement speed and fire rate a little bit higher for a longer duration, letting us complete this level a little bit quicker. There we are. That's kind of the trick to doing well at the end of this level and getting a quick time, I would say. Heavy attack. I'm the one that designed this level. I can still never remember exactly which locations the ranged enemies are. There we are. And running around. And not too bad. 2 minutes 35 seconds. I believe is the mithril time 2 minutes and 35? Oh my gosh. I was barely off of it. 2 minutes 35 seconds and 97 milliseconds. I was 97 milliseconds off. Alright, going back to the main menu here. Reading through the next task. So the next task that I did is actually non-demonstrable in this build, just because this was more so preparing a system for implementation in the next sprint. Getting it ready for the UI, since our UI was getting reworked this sprint. So I did all of this with debugs and print strings, but pretty much implementing a completion reward system. As a player, I want to choose between a random assortment of rewards after completing a level, so I can feel agency in my rewards during my run. Didn't have any dependencies. The completion criteria were upon completing a level in the campaign mode, players are shown a reward screen. The reward screen gives players an option, or gives players the option between 3 rewards. The rewards are randomized between a small list of reward choices. You can either get a starter weapon, a stat buff, or soul runes. Starter weapons, there's a 15% chance of getting a starter weapon, or a new starter weapon. There's a 65% chance of getting a new stat buff, and a 10% chance, or a 20% chance of getting a like soul runes. So the player would get 3 choices, kind of like in Gunfire Reborn. So kind of like this picture right here, they get 3 options. You get to choose between a weapon or a buff, or maybe it's a different type of buff, and so on and so forth. They can either get the Soul Devourer, Dual Blades, Base Sword, Time Dagger, different percentages for each of those if it falls within this. Same for the buffs. You can get a speed boost, a stat or attack speed boost, a increase in your mana or health capacity. You can increase your AoE size, and you can get a chance to essentially double cast without the mana cost on the second cast. So there's actually, instead of 35%, it's now, I believe, 50% chance. So if they choose that option, they have a 50% chance of casting a second range projectile without that cost of mana. And then there's the different soul runes. So a higher chance of getting 25% or 25 soul runes, then 50, then 75, then 100, which is only about 5% chance out of that already 20% chance there. So all of these are just randomized. It goes between the starter weapon, buffs, and then soul runes, and then after that it rolls and figures out which sub reward it would be. Then players are given the option to re-roll their options. The first re-roll is free. After the first re-roll, each re-roll increases by 10, so you start free, then 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, etc. Rerolls are reset after a run is finished. Players must click a reward to toggle it. When toggling on, the reward shows text describing the reward. When toggled on, the reward icon increases in size and highlight around it. If any reward is selected or toggled on, a confirm button with a green check mark will appear next to the reroll button, and the reroll button will become opaque and non-functional. And then that's pretty much flipped vice versa for the toggle off. So if it's toggled off, the reroll button would become clear and functional, while the confirm button will be more opaque and non-functional. Kind of just flipping it, showing which is functional, which is not. Once a reward has been selected and confirmed, the reward UI is hidden. Again, all the UI functionality has been pushed off to the next sprint, just since our main UI designer has been doing a rework on all of the UI this sprint. Pushed that off and just got the basic functionality of this done. I spent about 6 minutes in making it so that the first reroll is free. About 26 minutes in players, making sure that players are given the option to reroll their reward options. So players have a reroll option that allows them to reroll their item choices. Again, the first reroll is always free. After the first reroll, increasing by 10, put a little chart here just to kind of explain free, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, etc. Going on. That took me about 12 minutes, and then really the only thing that took me a good portion of time was the reward randomization list. It took me about 3 hours and 5 minutes, but that's only because I went through and in a actor component made sure that all of these were functional. So made sure that if the player selected this, then it would increase the health capacity, mana capacity would increase, attack speed would increase properly, speed increases, AoE size. I had to go through the weapons and in the weapon base add a variable for the AoE size. And then for this, the range projectile cast, I tested out as a bool, and it works just fine as a bool. Same with the soul runes, should add if the player selects that. Again, all these will be implemented the next sprint, next go around, just since just trying to get all the functionality ready for him to implement moving forward with the UI. All right, so that's pretty much all with that. I didn't really touch on this. This is just rerolls or reset after the run. That just goes along with, we just didn't get around to the saving portion. I think I started touching on this at the end of the sprint after I'd finished everything. Moving on to the Lower Palace Coliseum. So the next task that I did, I'm slotted to do levels 1, 4, and 5 out of our level structure that we have. So currently, I believe we have a 5-level structure. So it should be an intro, the second level, third, fourth, and then fifth. Fourth level is the Lower Palace Coliseum area. So it should be the player goes pretty much from hell into this Lower Palace area that has a city, and it leads into this much larger estate, essentially. Alright, so going through here, I'm going to, instead of reading through how I did in tutorial 1, or the level 1, I'm just going to read through all of these straight and then play through the level for you. Alright, so as a player, I want a level that lets me use all of my core mechanics learned from levels 1 through 3 and use them to fight enemies and a boss. Mechanics introduced should be the boss fight. This is going to be the first basic boss fight that the player encounters. Going into the level design. Description, it should be a bright, ethereal environment. Players start at the Lower Palace area, where they parkour across rooftops and fight enemy encampments on their way to the main castle area. The end of the level, the player the end of the level leads the player to the main castle, where there is an ending portal the player takes. At the start, the player should spawn in front of a portal. Again, talking about the intro cutscene, we wanted a kind of him walking out of a portal because he walks into a portal at the end of other levels. The player spawns on a rooftop, of what looks like houses floating on small islands. There's a low difficulty pathway leading to parkour section 1. And then going into parkour section 1, it's a basic parkour and movement mechanics are utilized. Easy parkour obstacles, some obstacles to kill the player. It gives a small break at the end before the player engages in combat. Again, putting the beaten melee and ranged enemies scattered around the end of the path. That will be implemented once we have the meshes. Branching path for the alternative parkour section 1 as well. And then alternative parkour section 1 should have a ghost vision shortcut, so it should be accessible and visible if the player is using their ghost vision. The fast path, faster than the base path. Easy to medium difficulty obstacles. Some obstacles to kill the player. It should start near the beginning of parkour section 1, and it ends at the end of parkour section 1. Alright. Going into combat section 1. So combat section 1 should have a small linear enemy encampment. It should be pretty much 4 combat encounters. There should be an easy one at the beginning, a more mid-range 2 in the middle there. So in this I have second combat and third combat. There's a fourth combat that I ended up adding in, so this wasn't hadn't been updated for that yet, but there are 4 encounters, but one is pretty much not necessary. It's more of a branch where the player can get an extra weapon or fight more enemies to get there to increase their multiplier. So the final combat area should be, have 2 towers with 1 ranged enemy per tower. Should be a lot more enemies, higher difficulty, 1 main path and 1 skip is available. Minimal and easy parkour in between. Then going into the parkour 2 path should be more of a mid-level difficulty parkour obstacles. Constant obstacles to kill the player. Few enemies on the pathway compared to the alternative path. It should allow the player to practice their chained grapples. So in level 3, prior to this, we have it set up to have the chained grapples introduced, I believe at the end, as kind of a teaser going into this level. Many obstacles to kill the player. So for the alternative parkour section 2, it's pretty much branches straight off of the parkour section 2. Alternative parkour section 2 does. So it should be about medium to hard difficulty. It branches from the chain grapple area, so essentially you'll get to a point in the chain grapples where you can either go to the right or go to the left. The left obviously looks more difficult because there's not as many safe spots to jump as the right. You'll see it more as we play through the level. Going through some enemies on the pathway. There's actually none on this pathway just because we wanted the player to be able to focus more on their grapple, because again it is a very difficult grapple puzzle. So we wanted the player, this is their first real difficult practice and mastery opportunity. So combat section 2, after the player gets through parkour 2 or alternative parkour 2, they branch back together. They kind of come full circle with one another and lead to a windstorm that leads the player into parkour or combat section 2, another linear combat section with easy parkour obstacles in between. It was supposed to be a spawner encampment, but we decided to change it to just having the basic enemies already spawned and testing out how performant it was with the basic enemies in there. So the first encounter, we wanted it to have 4 ranged enemies, then 8 melees, and then going into the third area, it should have a whole bushel of enemies, pretty much a whole slew of them. If players get to this spot, they should be. This is the 4th level. It's the second from last level. The players should be pretty pretty good at combat by this point. The 4th encounter had actually been omitted later on just to cut down on the length of the combat section 3 or combat section 2 and decrease the length of the level from, I think that added actually like 30 seconds onto it, which was crazy for one for one encounter. Parkour section 3 here. So after those little sections, it leads you into the Coliseum area, which goes into parkour section 3, which has a medium to hard parkour with high level parkour skips available, medium to hard difficulty parkour obstacles, mini obstacles to kill the player, small skips but no long alternative branching paths from this section. The player should be able to master their chained grapple here. This is the first mastery location of the chain grapple that the player will actually be able to utilize it for more than just getting from one platform to another. They can utilize it for speed or pulling themselves back down to the ground. There's multiple different utilizations that can be used to better the player's time and score. Going on to the boss fight here. So the boss fight actually changed. It changed multiple times after iterations and playtesting. Originally, it was supposed to have a 3-phase system. So it says 2 boss phases, where instead there's actually 3. It would be a chase phase, a boss phase 1, and a boss phase 2. So the chase phase, the boss would originally be seen in the Coliseum. It'd take the player through parkour 3 and lead them into the Coliseum area. That part just hasn't been implemented yet, just because of time constraints. And then boss phase 1 and 2 have been omitted, and I believe that we're just going with a chase phase and a boss fight phase. So the player chases the boss through the Coliseum, and the boss will be in the Coliseum at the end. They start the boss fight, and the boss spawns these rat bombers every so often, pretty much. We decided to set it up that way because originally, at the start of the sprint, we had the pacing model set up to introduce the spawner boss that we have in the 3rd level, and then this 4th level was going to be a combination boss, and then deciding partway through the sprint that we were going to change from that model into introducing only 2 boss fights to reduce some of the time that it took between the 1 and 5 levels, essentially. Pretty much narrowing some of this gameplay down and making it a little bit more refined. And then pretty much after you beat the boss, level end, after beating the boss, a cutscene plays showing the boss retreating, and the end portal is teleported to the center of the Coliseum. The win-lose conditions, same as every other level. Reach the end of the level, and you lose if your health falls below 0, or pretty much you die. Enemies introduced here. You have melee, ranged, bomber now, which bomber I believe gets introduced either in level 2 or 3, one or the other. Boss enemy, which is first introduced here, so this should be a basic boss fight. Points of interest: the Necromancer Castle, which was originally going to be the far end of the level, which just hasn't been put into the top of the environment, just because it wasn't necessary to the basic flow. It was more so just a landmark for the player to see at the beginning and end. Coliseum, which is in enemy spawner encampment for Combat 2. And then design philosophy is pretty much the same as every other level's design for this. We used our pacing model. I use a lot of leading lines. I try to use valves and gates as much as possible, especially in this level. Now that we have windstorms and grapples, it's a lot easier to restrict the player's movement back over areas. Prospect and refuge, giving the player those little breaks in between high intensity areas. And then the completion criteria here. The completion criteria, again, like I did with intro level, is all broken up into their subtasks. So I'll actually go through all of those as subtasks here. So the first completion criteria was that there is a start section that spawns the player on rooftops of a lower palace city. So start section, the player should spawn. These are all of the sections from the whole level design document, the description here, just placed into each of the subtasks so you can easily access them. So went over the first task there. The second task is that there is a parkour 1 section that gives the player an easy parkour warm-up. There is an alternative parkour 1 section that's revealable by using the ghost ability. This section should give the player an easy to medium challenge. There is a combat 1 section that contains 3 combat encounters, 5 enemies total, 6 melee, or not 5 enemies total. It was probably a little bit more than 5. 5 bomber enemies, 6 melee, and 7 ranged enemies. There's a parkour 2 section that lets players practice chaining grapples. There is an alternative parkour 2 section that's accessible via difficult branching grapple points during the chain grapple practice section. Sorry, a little bit wordy there. There is a combat 2 section that contains 4 combat encounters and 40 enemies total. Again, that was actually cut down because of the end section being omitted. Parkour 3 section. So there's a parkour 3 section that lets the player master the chaining grapple points. There's a boss fight that contains 3 phases. Chase phase, boss phase 1, which is 100 to 50% health, and then boss phase 2, which would be 50% to 0 health. Again, the boss phase has been kind of changed around as well and reworked, and will probably be reworked even more next sprint depending on how the playtest goes. And then there's an end section that is accessible after beating the boss and has a win volume. Again, that's just that boss retreating into the Coliseum. Okay. I'll go through the times here that I took on all these. So the start section, I spent about 14 minutes. Then parkour 1, I spent about 31 minutes. Parkour 1 alternative, I spent about 53. Combat 1, I spent an hour and 4 minutes. Parkour 2, I spent 50 minutes. Alternative parkour 2, I spent about an hour and 13 minutes. Combat section 2, I spent an hour and 7 minutes. Parkour section 3, I spent an hour and 21 minutes. The boss fight, I spent 3 hours and 36 minutes. And then the end section, I spent about an hour and 26 minutes. Alright, going into free play here. Since the levels are linked via a enum or a struct, it kind of is based on a current place, a current index that the level is in. So intro currently goes to level 2, which isn't in this build, so to access lower palace you have to go through the level select. Going through level select here. We can start the level. We're starting in the start area. Yeah, there it is. The first little portal leading us in here. These little rooftops. You can see nice islands floating around here, and you see this massive Coliseum up ahead. You're like, maybe I should go exploring around this area. I'll take you through the basic run here. Alright, take the first lift up. This is parkour section 1. There we go. And then taking this lift over to combat section 1. Oh, actually didn't make that lift. Fall back here. This takes us back to the lift location. There we go. Hold on. Let me jump back. Jump back here. There we go. Alright. Take that little windstorm over here. This is the first combat area. Going from chain to platform. You're able to practice and work with the multipliers here. A little bit of grapple work. If the player doesn't want to use the grapples yet, there are ways around that. To the right here, you can see the soul stream. The player can run this way, go around a quick and accessible way. Some more enemies scattered on this platform. There we go. If the player wants to use the grapple, they can definitely use the grapple points. You can skip this area, or that entire area right over there if you wanted to. There we go. Kill these enemies. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I'm getting absolutely slapped over here. So this area would lead originally down there, around to here, back into the same area that you can skip by just taking these grapple points. And then this area should lead you towards the combat, or parkour 2. Takes you up to this lift that pins you over to right. This little wall run that you can do a chain wall run. You don't even have to do a chain wall run. You can just do a basic one and just let yourself free fall. Going on the basic path here to the right, there can land on these rooftops and then continue grappling. So it's just going maybe one or two at a time, one or two grapple points at a time, to make it easy for the player on this path. Here we go. Running around this way. Using that grapple point to launch yourself up that up these wall runs gives the player more momentum. It felt great, honestly, using it as one of the movement mechanics in this. It gives the player a good wall run at that's just easy and controllable for him. More grapple points here. More ranged enemies on the towers, leading us into combat section number 2. There we go. Killing some of these melee enemies. And taking us up into... Ooh. I think this is spot 3 of combat section 2. I know it's a little hard to keep track of them. Here we go. There it is. Leading us into the Coliseum area, using the multiple windstorms to dash through. The Coliseum area didn't get a lighting pass on it this go through, so it's still in need of a lighting pass in Parkour 3. Right here we were able to use these little grapple points to pull ourselves up and use the soul streams to travel faster. There we go. Then taking us into the main boss area. The majority of the time for this boss fight was spent placing a lot of the traps throughout and placing the boss's spline, making sure that the boss was functional. There we go. And the boss, the end section, we'll see coming up. Oh my god. If I die, there you go. So the end section was actually, a lot of the time spent there was actually based on, oh my gosh, the spine wraps. A lot of the time spent for the end section, that hour, was rendering out that movie, making the level sequence, rendering that out and making it so that the portal spawned in the middle of the Coliseum there. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this again and take you through the alternative paths. Here we go. Going through the alternative path here. It's not really noticeable to players that much unless you try to mantle over here. Again, once more assets have been added into the level, it will be a lot more accessible and a lot more telegraphed to the player. But once you use the ghost ability, you're able to see that there's a ghost wall and another pathway through here. More difficult dash or wall run there, wall run combo, leading to a windstorm. Takes up to the first combat section. we go. We can skip some of these enemies. Little heavy attack. Alright. Then take us up to the next parkour, parkour 2. Alright. Maybe I can get this. So the left path is definitely, you can see it's the heart of the path. The next platform will be that right there. So we'll try to bring us up that way. There we are. And then right here, you should be able to hit this grapple point and pull yourself back down if you are low enough or quick enough as well. Dash across there, and we're back to the next combat area. Combat 2. Alright. Kill some of these melee enemies. Later in this level, you can also see that I added these ramps to the lips. I believe that I'm going to be going back through all the other uses of these buildings and adding these little wooden ramps just to prevent the player from getting stuck on the ledges, the lips of the building. Like over here, I'll demonstrate it. There you go. Okay. So you see, it just stops the player from walking over it because it's just a little bit too tall. So the extra lips, extra ledges definitely help out. After being launched in here too, if the player goes off to the right, so with the lower section, if the player goes to the right, there is another soul stream to the right side that branches and takes the player to another branching path, which is actually, if the player from the start goes to the right instead of the far side, they will notice that there is a mantling puzzle. Once there's a lot more lighting, it'll be a lot more evident and noticeable as well. Quite dark as well. You can't see too much in here, but there's a wall run combo right there that takes you to a soul stream. A lot of melee enemies around, and then that branching path actually branches and leads us up into right here. As you can see right down there. Ooh. Wasn't paying attention. No, and I lost it. But anyway, the soul streams, the whole purpose of this parkour section is for players to learn to optimize their speed and to get their speed going quick. The soul streams mixed with the grapples are great for increasing your speed and keeping momentum up. So that's like one of our main core design pillars is momentum. So we want players to utilize their momentum and speed. And this is the perfect puzzle, because if players just walk through this, you can imagine that this might take a little bit more time than just using these soul streams, which boost your speed, mixed with the grapples that give you an extra pull towards the location. It's just a lot more quick for the player. Alright, going through, killing the boss here. We'll just try to kill him really quick. Try to tank his hits. There we go. You can see at the beginning that the portal isn't actually in the middle area here. As well, scattered throughout the stadium. Through the Coliseum, we have different weapons. For instance, if the player wants to come over here and get these dual blades, they can get the dual blades if they want. You can kill some of these. Alright, but that should be it for this level. I'm gonna back out here. We'll go over the next task on the docket. So that's it for Lower Palace Coliseum. Alright, the next task that I have a few extra tasks in here. Mantle sound effects. So, description: mantling should have sound effects that play when using the ability. I spent about 10 minutes doing this. I'm going to the toy box. I'll show the rest of these in the toy box here. A little bit more performant. Alright, So the ledges, if you just listen, I could probably pause it and sounds. Okay, just make sure it's not deafening. All right, so you should be able to hear some footsteps and kind of a grunt when he goes over ledges. Yeah. Yeah. So every time he goes over, and I just did that by going into his animation and doing using animation notifies. Quick and easy. We will go back to that actually. We'll go back to this here in a second. Removing time slow from right mouse button projectile attack. I spent about 8 minutes doing that. Just pretty much unlinking all the code for the time slow. Originally we had it set up that when you press the right mouse button input, it would, and you were in like ranged mode, it would slow time. And now all it does is the special attack. The player should just do their special melee. Okay. On to the next here. Adjusting the multiplier decay rate. Here, give me 1 second. Alright, sorry about that. So adjusting the multiplier decay rate, we had to change we got a lot of feedback that the multiplier was decaying too quick based on the amount that you had. So if you had a 10-time multiplier, it would still decay at 4 seconds based on, even though you're at a 10-time multiplier compared to like a 1-time multiplier that still decays at 4 seconds. It's just it's not good positive feedback for the player. So I kind of upped it, made it so that made this little graph, and I pretty much just did it used a switch on integer, and every time, or depending on the multiplier that it's on, so if it's on 1, it'll go to a certain decay rate all the way through 10. You could have done an equation, but the switch was easier, and I can manipulate it a lot quicker and easier just by plugging in different values. Spent about 24 minutes doing that. So we can go in here. I can show you that. So it should be 4 seconds for 1. Let me actually go over here and show this one. There it is. And then if we get all the way up to 10, even at 7, you can see it's decaying a lot slower. Getting up to 10 seconds, or 10 times multiplier, it should take about 10 seconds for it to fully decay. There you go. That's pretty much all that there was to the modifying the decay rate for that. Pretty much just manipulating, making that quick little function that switches on the integer. Audio feedback for low health. I can show you that. So the audio feedback for low health, as the player, I want a continuous audio feedback when my health falls below pretty much 20%, 20% max health, so I can better manage my health without taking my focus off the main objectives. So the completion criteria are when the player's health is below 1/5 or 20% of their max health, sound effects will play looping. When the player's health rises above 20%, the sound effects will stop looping. I spent 30 minutes implementing this. So we go in here. Okay, let me just take one more. There we go. So you can hear that little cracking sound. You can hear a little cracking sound playing every, I believe it should be about 7 or 10 seconds. Maybe I can get some health back from these. Try to get some health back from some of these enemies. There we go. Show you that there we go. Now that we're over 20% health, it shouldn't play anymore. I'll leave it play for a little. There we go. Yeah, so then if we go back and we let them tick us below 20, even though we're at 20 as well, it's only if the player is just right under 20%. So if we take like just a small tick here, oh my god, hear that cracking starting again. Yeah, there you go. So now going to, that took 30 minutes. Here's this. The multiplier move speed increase doesn't reset decay to normal when the multiplier bonus runs out. So the expected result was that the player move speed should reset back to normal once the multiplier ends. The actual result was that the move speed was staying every time that the player got a multiplier, so it would pretty much increase the move speed constantly. So you get a 10 times multiplier and then you lose it, and then you get another 10 times multiplier and then lose it until you were pretty much Usain Bolt running throughout your level. It was great. The steps to replicate: you would start the toy box level, kill some enemies, get the multiplier, let the multiplier bonus end, and then you would just move, and you would definitely see a change. It took me about 16 minutes to iron this out. Let me show you here. So let me just restart the level. So movement speed right now, well, it's normal speed. And then kill all these enemies. Now we can see it's pretty quick. Movement speed's quick. The multiplier movement speed. I shouldn't have killed him. I shouldn't have killed him. I'll go back here and let this multiplier fall off. And now we can see we're back down to the low movement speed. So it's just a changing of just resetting the base movement values for that. Going back here to that, and that took me about 16 minutes to finish. Mantle speed needs increased. I'm just trying to see which ones I can show in the toy box here. So the mantle speed needs to be increased by half a second or less. This took me about 16 minutes. So originally the mantle speed was a little bit slow, and just for our game, since we have a lot of quick and snappy movements, like even the dash is almost instantaneous. The player's almost there instantaneously. The mantle speed was just a little bit slow, so you can see here, let me jump down to the very bottom. So if you jump up now, it's pretty almost instantaneous if the player gets up the ledge. Oops. But the player should be able to, here we go, there we are, should be able to mantle pretty quick like that. For this, I went through, in the mantle logic and changed one of the variables. I believe it was a delay variable to lower, and then I increased the play rate of the animontage that we're using for this in the motion. I can't think of the motion blending. There we are. Yeah, pretty much just changed that, increased the speed of it a little bit. Changed heavy attack to always be triggerable. So spent about 15 minutes doing that. As the player, I want to always have my heavy attack ability so I can rely on it in a variety of scenarios. The completion criteria are that the player can now heavy attack regardless of the height. If the player is too close to the ground when heavy attacking, it will cost mana. So originally, if the player would, let's say the player is jumping and they try to heavy attack, it wouldn't heavy attack because we used a function that says calculate the distance to the floor, and then it sends you back a bowl. It'll tell you whether or not it's too close to the floor or if it's too far. And originally we would say if the player's falling, so if they're in the air and they're too close to the floor, then then don't do anything. Like don't trigger anything, so that the player couldn't always use their heavy attack. But now it's just rerouted so that the player should be able to do the heavy attack without spending their mana if they jump off a ledge like that, and if they jump from the floor and try to do it. So if I jump from the floor now and try to do it, it'll spend mana and do it almost instantaneous, like as if I were doing it from here. There's that. What else? Kill volume, Soul Devour has old logic, tutorials. I can show that. Lower Palace. And these are all for the Lower Palace. Alright, so the Soul Devour, I started to work on some of the issues with this. The Soul Devour was having a lot of issues with people understanding it. So originally it was set up that it would tick the health and the mana. So it would tick the player's health if they were in a health mode, it would tick the player's mana if they were in a mana mode. And we decided to take out the health mode because it was killing players because they didn't understand that they were getting their health ticked constantly by holding that sword. So now we updated it, and it says Soul Devour, it's a cursed sword. So people are scared of it. They're like, whoa, it's a cursed sword. What's the thing gonna do to me? The passive skills, -1 or -5 mana per second. So you're losing 5 mana a second. Plus 10 mana per sword kill. Alright. So, you see here, it's ticking the mana. And originally the player would be able to hit the right mouse button and it would switch the modes, and now it just plays the same type of attack. The same type of attack as the base sword. There you go. It has the same functionality as the base sword and it's special. But the mana itself will tick down, as you can see. We'll let it tick down to, I believe it should go to 35. And then once it gets to 35, once it gets to 35, it'll tick a bowl that allows the player to begin regenerating again. And then on every kill, so if you kill an enemy, it should increase the mana by 10. So let me restart this and I can get some more enemies here. So I updated that tutorial as well, and I'll show you that. So there we go. And the mana constantly increasing down there. We're going to get a multiplier of 10 times and get our ultimate. So press the left alt to cast a ultimate black hole. So if we step back and press left alt, it'll draw in those enemies and kill them. There we go. And then pressing our Q, we also have our little secondary devouring black hole that just sends out. Alright. So out of those tasks here. So the Soul Devourer has old attack functionality. The Soul Devourer still has old attack functionality that switches from health to mana mode. This code was unhooked and deprecated, so this needs to be updated to only have mana mode and have a basic AoE special attack like the base sword. So as you saw, I added the basic AoE for the special attack, and it still has the ultimate ability while only using the mana mode rather than mana and health. The steps to replicate: you can start the toy box level, go to the right after spawning, pick up the Soul Devourer sword, tap the right mouse button to trigger the special attack, and this would originally switch it between health and mana mode. The desired results are to have the right mouse button perform a heavy attack and only have a mana mode that ticks down the mana to about 35 mana, then allows the player to regenerate. That took me about an hour and 52 minutes to complete that, to get that all reworked and finished up. just because I had some issues with uh, the mana ticking, because we currently have a regen, so on the HUD it was ticking up, then ticking down, and it looked very jumpy. So I had to rework it and make it so that it ran off of a bowl, and the bowl, if ticked, would tick down the health or would stop the regen, and then if it were unticked, it would allow for, or if it were ticked, it would allow for regen. If it were unticked, it would take away the regen and would not allow regen to work. That should work good. And the Soul Devour tutorial information needed updated. So the Soul Devour tutorial show old information. They need updated to show the current decay rate and mana functionality along with the current special attack. So steps to replicate. So you start the toy box level, go to the right after spawning and pick up the Soul Devour sword. Review the basic tutorial. Test the information presented in the tutorial, get 10 kills with the sword, review the ultimate attack tutorial, test the information presented in the tutorial. So the desired results were that these tutorials should present the proper information for decay rate, the special attack, ranged attack, and ultimate attack. And at the time, none of those were checked off. This took me about 45 minutes. It was pretty much just going through all of the different UI widgets, making sure that they were current with the current schemes, and making sure that the all of the inputs were functional as well. As I also showed that, I can restart this and show it here again. So it should show you the proper information here. So it just shows you the basic passive skills that plus 10 mana per sword kill, minus 5 mana per second. And for the ultimate attack, it should also be updated with the proper icon. Press left alt, it should have the alt button, cast an ultimate black hole, and it should show you the proper video in that one. Whereas the other one, I still believe it doesn't show the proper videos because it's just not, I don't think that we have the videos in there yet for it. Okay, remove the last combo animation on left attack. Alright, so this was remove the last combo animation for smooth gameplay. Let me see if I can. What's up? So this took me about 25 minutes. So originally our attack combination. I don't know if I can show if there's any weapons that utilize it. Maybe this one does, actually. No. I can't think of any weapon that might utilize any of the. That one doesn't. That one doesn't. No. I don't think any of them work with that. But anyway, our attack animation, our basic combo, originally went. It was a 4-strike combo. So the player would do a right to left. So if they're holding their sword in their right hand, it's a right to left, and then left to right, and then right to left, down to like a downward power swing. And I took the final animation, the downward power swing, out because it felt too slow, and we were left with the basic 3-hit. But now it's just the 3-hit side to side, pretty much, without the downward swing at the end. Just for a little bit smoother, a lot quicker strike succession. Here. Especially when you're increasing the attack rate. There it is. Alright. So yeah, that took me about 25 minutes. And then going into the last 3 here that I have. I didn't do this, the dash animation pose, because the dash animation pose, I think we resolved that it wasn't necessary and didn't need it, since no one really looks down while dashing. In a it's a first person, it wasn't really necessary, or at least a necessity in this build. Enemy AI not functional in parts of the lower palace level. So some enemies are non-functional when playing through the lower palace level. Start lower palace level, reach combat section 1, reach combat section 1-2A, which is like the first combat section, second area, and then the 2B section would be the one that's not necessary. And then 2-2, combat section 2-2 would be the second combat section, second encounter area. So these are just all of the different AI that were non-functional in those areas through my playtest. So I went through the desired outcome. All AI should be functional, and navigating AI shouldn't be stagnant and unresponsive. The severity, severe, is just, it hindered gameplay. It took me about 30 minutes to nail down because I kind of had to go through and replay it multiple times, work with the nav mesh, and just rebuilt it. Had to rebuild it multiple times. So I'll go through here. So going into parkour section, or combat section 1, I'll just show you that all of the enemies should now be functional. Our old input was R for this, so I was pressing R. I was like, why is the ghost not popping up for me? Alright, there we go. All these skeletons are coming over. They're functional. The ranged enemies now functional in 1-1, 1-2A. So all of the lower enemies are functional. The ranged enemies, we have deduced that it is actually these towers being too tall. So I think what I do to get up there, maybe jump on this. That might trigger. I can go over this way and show first. Okay, so over here, all of these enemies should be functional. You can see. Functional. Alright. And then if we take this, grapple back over, you'll see that after we pass through like a higher section with those enemies, maybe this one might be decent. Hold on. There we go. It should be, oh, maybe not in this build anymore. Let me pull back over here. Here's that one. that one's going. But pretty much we believe that it's the height of these towers. They're not actually able to put their traces on the bow from those towers. So I believe have a bug already put in for that. Just didn't get to it in this sprint. Just because it was on the most recent build here. Going into combat section 2-2. Over here. Go through the parkour section real quick, hopefully. Oh no! Kept my momentum there. That was crazy. This little area. Alright, going up here, I believe this is start of combat 2. No? So, area 2-2 here. You can see all the melee enemies are navigating and functional and tracking me and trying to kill me, and all coming to their inevitable demise, if you will. Alright, I'll go ahead and pause this. Here we go, going back into the board here. So that, again, took me about 30 minutes to fix the AI in the lower palace. The windstorm was inconsistent, leading from parkour 1, or leading from combat 1 to parkour 2. This took me about 25 minutes to hash out. I decided in the end, I could probably backtrack here and get back to it. So the windstorm down. Oh, no, it's a... I could probably get back through, right? Dash across. There we go. So it's this windstorm back here. Right after combat 1. And a little old dash. Okay. After combat 1, this windstorm was sending the player. If the player would walk straight off the chain, it would send the player off to the right or the left, or they just would fall a little shallow of the ledge, and it just was inconsistent. So that led me to this bug where I decided. So the windstorm after the first combat section in the lower level palace is inconsistent at getting the player to the desired platform above. Steps to replicate: you would start the lower level or lower palace level, reach the end of combat section 1, attempt to use the windstorm to reach the desired platform multiple times. And currently at the time, it was only allowing me to make it, 50 to 60% of the time. Like it was very inconsistent. And I at least wanted it so that it would, take you to the desired location at a minimum of 90% of the time. You would maybe get one time out of a few that would send you off astray or kind of out to the side or a little bit shallow, but other than that one little time, you should be able to get it consistently. Now you can see that it launches you both up, and I had it launch you in the direction so that it sends the player not just up and gets them some height, but also gets them just straight above the platform, so they can always make this platform that's easily accessible and that they don't necessarily undershoot it or overshoot. So that's kind of what I did on that. I had that as severe as well because it was hindering the player from actually completing the level. It was hindering them from continuing past pretty much combat 1 into parkour 2, or it would slow them down significantly. Okay, then moving on through the final task here, I went through, let me just double check here, remove all those, did that, those, Sword of Hour, last combo, AI. Alright, so the kill volumes that were, there were no kill volumes that were present at the end of the lower palace level. So after one of the builds that I made, I believe it was the second. Yeah, it should have been the second. The end of the lower palace level just didn't have any kill volumes that were placed. You could start it once you got past, I think, or got to parkour 2. You would jump off a platform and you would wait significantly, like a significant amount of time until you would die. So here I can go through that and test that and show that off. That took me about 21 minutes to do, or to tackle there. 21 minutes getting that. So I said that, or I put that the desired outcome should be that there should be kill volumes throughout the level, and that players shouldn't be falling for more than roughly about 3 seconds. Not necessarily that it has to be exactly or under 3 seconds always, just so that it is a consistent 3 seconds. well through here. If players, per se, don't make it up or decide to go down here, it's a little empty now just because there's no placeholder assets down throughout here. But players are able to go up this way and take themselves back up and go around. And go through the side. So if they fall down there, there's always an extra way up. Right? And then if they fall down, they should die pretty quickly. But then if you fall over here, yep, it'll be pretty quick. If you fall down by this, you shouldn't die, but if you fall down there, yep. Alright. Then going up, so this is the beginning of parkour 2. Let me try the middle here. That's one. That's one that needs fixed. This is probably just the checkpoint just a little bit low. A little bit low on the platform. Whoops. Overshot the dash. Right here. There you go. That one's good. And then going off to this last little bit right in front. Alright, that takes a little bit, but not necessarily the amount that it was taking. It was taking, I would say you would fall from here and you would get almost down to the lower, you would almost get down to the beginning of the level. So it was quite significant. Now it is much better. Alright, nearing the end here. Jump down. There you go. Still, again, still a little bit, takes a little bit of time. I didn't want these ones to be too tall or too high up. But it's much, whoops. We'll try over here. So if you fell from down here, you'd be dying right about there. And then we'll, oh, just fell right off. Fell right off again. Let me go to the area right before parkour 3. We did it right there already. Okay. Then I will just kind of go over here and dash out once. So we have a little bit of upwards momentum, so yeah, there's a kill volume right there. Let me see if I can go get out of this. Go over here. Yeah. Alright, good. Yeah, so all the kill volume should be present in that level there. And I believe that was the last major task that I had in Jira. I believe. So that is actually it for me. Let me go ahead and I'll finish out this level. Might as well. I'm already 11 minutes into it. Might as well give her the old college try here. I'll take the one route that I didn't take in the lower path. I'll take the right side. Go up to that. Go. Using these grapples to really get you going. I'll zoom through it and try to stay alive. I'm at 24. I'm at 13. No! I'm already low health from falling in pits. Oh my gosh, and he's so quick. Oh no, no. Oh no. Oh my god, I knew he was gonna banish me. Ugh. Well, that's it for me. I appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you.